Hello everyone, I am International Master Ratkovic Milovan. Welcome to my new course. In the next 10 hours we are going to talk about the Queen's Gambit declined as black. As you know, d4 is very tricky first move, and it's really not easy to find good opening repertoire as black. If you want to play something stable, something solid, safe, reliable, this is the right place for you, and Queen's Gambit declined is the right opening for you. What is the point with this opening? After white goes d4, black goes d5. As you can see, we fight there in the center. We play very normally, logically. That's it. That's it. In this whole opening, in all these variations, you will see later we'll talk about some really interesting variations. Black should just play logically. Development is very important in this opening, so you should just develop your pieces as soon as possible, and that's it. There are really not so many complications here. You just play normally, and that's all. Almost all world champions used to play Queen's Gambit declined as black, and yeah, I mean, it's important to say that because this is one of the safest openings you can play against d4, probably the safest one. So here in this course we are going to talk about Alatortsev variation of Queen's Gambit declined. Very good line for black. Actually, usually strong players play Alatortsev variation because we want to avoid some tricky lines, and yeah, that's it. I don't want to bother you with introduction so much, so I want to start analyzing some lines right away. Okay, so d4, d5. Pawn goes to c4, so Queen's Gambit. Then we don't accept that offer. We go for e6, declined. We declined white's pawn sacrifice, so pawn to e6. Now, the main move for white is knight to c3. Very logical move. The b1 knight belongs here, and there is really not much to say about this move. Basically, everybody plays that. Later, we will talk about some other possibilities for white, like knight f3, and then maybe later knight from b1 goes to d2 in some variations, but we will see that those lines are not so good for white. Also, we'll be talking about c takes d5 instead of playing knight c3, but again, black is good there because this is simply too early. So knight goes to c3 is the best and like the main move for white. I already mentioned that we're going to talk about Alatortsev variation. So what is Alatortsev variation? That is when black goes for bishop e7 in the third move. Actually, our bishop will, I mean, even if we don't play Alatortsev, if we play this main variation with knight f6, this is the main way to play Queen's Gambit declined. Anyway, our dark square bishop will go to e7 anyway. But when we go bishop e7, first we avoid some very tricky systems, and I don't want to do this right now to show you what variations we avoid. I don't want to confuse you. I just want to say that if you go for bishop e7 in the third move, you will surprise many opponents because they expect knight f6 in the third move, not bishop e7. And again, I'm saying Alatortsev variation is very popular on a higher level, so many titled players play bishop e7 as a third move as black. So bishop goes to e7. Now there are two types of variations that we are going to talk about in this course. First, we will do a variation typical for Queen's Gambit declined, like generically, like for like all variations in Queen's Gambit declined, normal variations in Queen's Gambit declined, typical variations. Second type of variations are variations typical for Alatortsev. When I say that, I mean what will happen if cd5, ed5, and then bishop goes to f4. This normally doesn't happen in typical Queen's Gambit decline, and that we will do in the second part of this course. In the first part, we will talk about some normal stuff in Queen's Gambit decline. In that sense, we will start doing knight goes to f3. Knight to f3 is the most popular move for white. A lot of people do that. You see, white is just developing his pieces normally, and that's it. Knight from g8 jumps to f6 now. This is normal Queen's Gambit decline. Our knight is good there, and that's it. Now, the most popular move for white is bishop g5. Bishop goes to g5. Yeah, I mean, white, this bishop is very natural on g5. That's a good square for white's dark square bishop. And in some variations, white is planning to take the knight. I mean, this pin here is sometimes tricky, you know. So, yeah, bishop g5 is typical move for white, and that's normal. That's how people usually play. Then we can do what? We can attack the bishop. So, this move is interesting. I mean, we now force white to decide what to do. There are now two possibilities. White can either take on f6, we will do that later, we'll definitely talk about that variation, and there is bishop goes back to h4. Bishop to h4 is like the main move. Bishop f4 for white is not so good, because then we will go into Horowitz attack, also a standard variation in Queen's Gambit decline, but white will be a tempo down, because we played h6 with tempo. So bishop f4, I don't count as like a good reply by white. So we will analyze two moves. We will analyze bishop takes and bishop h4. So let's start with bishop h4, main move. Now castling for black, and then pawn goes to e3 for white, the only move. I mean, you know, just white need to play that sooner or later. Now what? Our king side is well developed. We managed to develop our king side knight, our bishop, we managed to castle. Now our pieces, you see that our pieces on the queen side are still undeveloped. We just need to develop them, and that's all. That's the whole point in Queen's Gambit decline. Good development and control in the center. How to develop these pieces? Let's go b6. Our light square bishop is restricted, and the best way to develop it is to do this. Fianchetto on b7. Now there are a lot of possibilities for white. You will see, I mean, there are like a lot of different moves. White can go rook c1, white can play queen c2, white can play queen b3, bishop can go to e2, bishop can go to d3, c takes d5 can be played, bishop takes f6 can be played. We will analyze all those moves. I wanted to start with the main one, with the most popular one. That move is bishop goes to d3. As you can see, bishop d3 is a very logical move. I mean, white develops his bishop normally. That's it. Now, what should black do? Black should develop the bishop. Bishop goes to b7. That's normal. And then we have a few options for white. One of them is castling. Castling is the main move for white, and you already know why. It's normal that white castles. Now knight bd7 for black. This is typical development for black in Queen's Gambit declined. The d7 knight is defending the knight on f6. Also, we prepare c5. We want to play c5 in order to fight for the center. Now, again, a few different ideas for white. This is the main one. This is the main move. Queen goes to e2, and now white wants to develop the rooks like this. What should black do? There are also a few options for black, and I think that black has very solid position already, and like everything is under control, as you can see. everything is normal, everything is solid, you know. In my opinion, the best move for black is knight to e4. We want to exchange a few pairs of minor pieces, and then after that, position will be totally equal. White's dark square bishop, I want to say, takes on e7. Queen takes e7. Then maybe cd5. I mean, now you would probably ask, okay, but what will happen if white takes the knight on e4? Okay, this doesn't work because there is a fork, black is winning. If bishop takes e4, also a mistake, this time positional mistake, then de4, and after knight e2, f5 can be played. Rook to d1, and then e5 can be played. Now if de5, this is a mistake, clear mistake, then knight takes e5, and we'll jump to d3. Black's position is very, very comfortable. This rook will go there, black will push f4 or something like that later, eventually, and black's position is very good. If white doesn't take e5, if white goes d5, then knight f6 could be played, a3 maybe with b4 idea, then a5 to stop that, and then rook from a8 goes to e8, bishop comes back to b7, and what is black's plan here? Black is planning to push f4 at some point and to attack on the king side. That is idea behind this variation. But let's go from beginning. Again, move by move. So d4 in the first move for white. d5, c4, e6. Knight c3, then bishop goes to e7. Very precise move order. We play a la Tortsev. But then white goes knight f3 and goes for normal standard variation of Queen's Gambit. Decline, then knight f6, and then bishop g5. This is like the main line here. h6, bishop h4, short castle. e3, b6. Now bishop d3. I already told you there are a lot of different moves and ideas for white, but we will start with the main one, bishop d3. Bishop e7, short castle, knight bd7, and then queen goes to e2. Knight e4 should be played. Bishop e7, queen e7. Okay, I mean, maybe white doesn't want to take on e4. Instead, white goes rook a to c1. This is normal move. I mean, in case of knight takes e3, white wants to take back with the rook. Now black should play c5. We want to fight there in the center, and that's why we do this. Rook fd1 maybe. Then let's take on c3. Rook takes. Let's take on c4. Bishop takes. Let's take on d4. Let's play knight c5. Then the next move is rook fd8. Position is totally equal. White didn't achieve anything here. There is no advantage for white. Black managed to equalize. That's it. This is the goal. Of course, after going rook d8, maybe black could double up the rooks on the d file or something like that. So yeah, the next step is to gain some advantage. We managed to equalize, and now we will try to gain some advantage here. What else after knight e4? Okay, first bishop e7, queen e7. So we talked about rook c1. Maybe cd5. cd5 looks like a good move, interesting move. Then e takes d5 should be played. Rook a c1. Okay, this is the best move order because now the c file is totally open and we still have this backward pawn c7. But we will do something about that. c5 should be played for black. Now the main move for white is bishop a6. That is a very good move because white wants to remove our light squared bishop. Then d5 pawn will be hanging and just our pawn structure will be not unstable, but we will not have this important piece here. So bishop goes a6. Interesting move. Then let's play knight d to f6. Bishop e7, queen b7. If dc5, bc5. Knight takes e4, knight takes e4. Rook c2, rook a c8. We have hanging pawns in the center, as you can see. This happens a lot in Queen's Gambit Decline, but don't worry. Those pawns are very stable. f8 rook will go to d8, and both of them are, well, protected. Later, black could go for d4 and maybe create passed pawn on the d file. Position is very, very good for black. It is equal, yeah, but I mean, as you can see, there are still a lot of pieces on the board, and like both sides have good chances here. Okay, so knight e4 was played in this moment after queen e2. Bishop e7, queen e7, cd5 is a good move. ed5, and then rook to c1. c5. We talked about bishop a6. What will happen if white takes on c5? bc5, of course. Look, it's not good to take with the knight. I mean, it's playable, but a little bit suspicious in my opinion. Then knight d4 can be played, and we will have isolated pawn on d5. Don't get me wrong, black is not lost or something like that, or much worse, but white's position is more comfortable. That's why I think bc5, we will have hanging pawns, but again, I'm saying those hanging pawns are very stable. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about here. Now if bishop takes e4, d4, knight d2, then f5 could be played to defend e4. Knight c4, then bishop a6, pinning the knight. Knight d5, attacking the queen, queen f7, maybe knight c7 to fork, but then we can exchange some pieces and have equal endgame. Bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, and then rook c8. Position is equal. There was a game played in 2012 between Grandmaster So and Grandmaster Landa. It was a draw. If you have time, it would be good to analyze this game. It's very, very instructive. Okay, knight e4. I always come back to knight e4 because I find this moment very important, and yeah. Knight e4. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, cd5, ed5, rook c1, c5 should be played, dc5, bc5. We talked about bishop e4. What if white doesn't take there? Instead, there is rook fd1, then knight c3 should be played, rook c3, and then rook to d8, then rook ac8 will be played in the next move. Bishop a6, let's take there, and let's go knight f6. Queen a5 to attack the c5 pawn, then knight e4 will be played with tempo. Rook cd3, attacking the d5 pawn, as you can see. Then queen f6, counterattack. We attack b2 pawn. b3 maybe, and then rook d6 is a fantastic move. We want to double up our rooks on the d file, but there is also concrete threat. Black is threatening to go to a6, attack the queen, and when queen goes somewhere, the a2 pawn is hanging. Position is totally equal. Okay, one more thing to show you, and basically we are done with this first part, with the first video. After going to e4, white doesn't have to take the bishop on e7. White could go bishop g3. Bishop g3 is interesting variation. Basically, people on a higher level do that. I mean, because it's really not easy for somebody not so strong, for let's say normal ordinary player, to go bishop g3 and give up that strong bishop like that. But bishop goes g3 is a good move, because if white takes, if black takes, black loses this important central e4 knight, and white's position is probably slightly better. But again, we will see that this is really nothing special. Black can equalize after a few moves. So of course that will take that good bishop. H takes g3, dc4, bishop c4, and then a6. We want to push b5 and increase our space advantage on the queen side. Rook d1 maybe. b5, and then before we go c5. c5 is now dangerous because white's rook on d1 and our queen on d8 are in the same line. Instead, queen b8 should be played, and we will push c5. Maybe in the next move, maybe in 2 moves. Anyway, we will do that very soon. Bishop c2, rook d8 maybe. By the way, if queen d3 to threaten mate on h7, then just knight f6 followed by c5, and the position is even slightly better for black, because black has a bishop pair here. If maybe d5, d5 is interesting move, then knight goes f8, d6, knight e6. Rook d8, queen d8, queen e8, and then rook d8 will be played with totally equal position. Now what will happen if white wants to stop b5? White goes for a4. So our last move was a6. We wanted to prepare b5. Now a4. If a4, then bishop b4 could be played. Why? Because we want to have this good square for our queen, and also in some variations we can take this knight, because that knight could be dangerous for us. Rook d1, queen e7, rook c1, rook d8, e4, knight f6. Now we're threatening to take on c3, and then the e4 pawn is hanging. If e5, knight d5, knight e4, c5, knight d6, attacking the bishop. I mean, it's defended, but white would like to take our good bishop. We could take there, bring the bishop back, and you see white didn't achieve much here. Position is totally unclear. It's equal, but yeah, I mean, very sharp, but black is good, and white doesn't have any advantage here. I know it was not so, it was complicated. White had the strong knight on d6, but not so dangerous. After cd4, black is threatening to take on d6, and now white is forced to take the bishop on b7, but then there is less pieces on the board, which is good for black, and black equalizes right after that. One more thing to show you, and we are done with this first part. What will happen if now we're threatening to take on c3 and then to take on e4? What happens if bishop d3? If bishop d3, black can even have advantage after c5. c5 should be played, and then white's center will fall apart. We are done with this. I hope you like this. We will be talking about bishop d3 variation in the next video too. So yeah, that's it. See you in the next video.